Ready?
All right, it's recording. Okay, so welcome back to PolitiTalks. We got our typical guys here, me, of course, Cryo, Neil, and Zach. Tonight's topic is going to be healthcare. That's basically all we got. We might talk about some other stuff later on if the podcast goes long, seeing how we're feeling in about an hour. Last week's was about 2 hours and all kinds of issues. We'll get it all figured out.
Well, I've got we're starting recording here at approximately 4:15. I do have a hard stop today at 5:30 for other personal events. So
I guess today's gonna be a problem. Hopefully we can get everything.
We're gonna cram it all in. We're gonna talk really fast, and I'm gonna be hyper caffeinated. It's all good.
All right, Neil, if you want to start us off.
I'll go ahead and start us off. First, for the returning viewers, thank you. And last week's episode will be uploaded shortly. Once we had some technical difficulties, there's a lot more editing that's required, but it will be uploaded shortly. That said, moving on to today's topic of healthcare, I do want to start a quantifying question before we get into the topic, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. And I guess the basic fundamental question I'd like to ask everyone when I start this conversation with them is this: do you believe that healthcare is a privilege or a right?
Oh, that is a loaded question. It kind of depends on what your definition of a right is. Mm-hmm. So I would, being someone who has worked in the medical field, myself used to work as an EMT. I would say that we always cared for anybody that we came across. And I felt that was the morally correct thing to do, is to provide healthcare to everyone. So from that perspective, I do believe everyone is morally obligated to be able to receive medical treatment for their disease, their issue, their immediate injury, whatever.
And I guess I should also say that we're not talking about elective surgery. So I do understand that can be a catching point. I'm talking about basic healthcare. So you are sick to go see a doctor. Do you believe it is a privilege, or is it a right?
I believe it is a right to be able to see a doctor. From a moral obligation. If you show up at a hospital, they should be legally required to treat you, which is currently the standard in the United States. You show up in a hospital and you have a stab wound. Does not matter what insurance you have. They're legally required to treat you.
Yep.
Okay. The reason I'm smiling is because there's some loopholes to that, right?
So they are legally, when I say treat you, I guess I'll provide some further context there. They are legally required to stabilize you. If you are dying, they have to stop you from dying. Now, if you have other further medical issues beyond that, where like, hey, I've got this toe fungus and whatever, they're not legally required to treat those issues. If you are,
that's also if you show up on your own, not in an ambulance, because they can reject an ambulance showing up.
They can if they don't have any room for it. They will redirect ambulances if they don't have room, or if their hospital is not authorized or is not the correct treatment type center. So for instance, the hospital that's right up the street from me is a tier 1 trauma center. There's another hospital that's about 12 miles up the road that is not a tier 1 trauma center. All the traumas that happen right around that hospital are not legally allowed to transport to that hospital. They have to come to the hospital that's closer to me because it is a tier 1 trauma center. They also have the other hospital, though, is the stroke center that's nearby, but the hospital close to me is not a stroke center. So depending on your particular medical issue, the hospital closest to you might not be the best place for you to be treated, nor may they be the correct authorized location for you to be treated. There are obviously people that are going to come in with unknown issues where they're just going to be treated at that hospital. But if you have a known issue, like someone's presenting with stroke symptoms, they're going to go to a hospital that has a stroke. They're authorized as a stroke center versus others, or particularly one people die from most is trauma centers, like motor vehicle accidents in particular, are the big ones in our areas because of the freeway speeds, as well as dirt bike. There's a lot of people that go out in the desert out here. And all like Memorial Day weekend, our hospital is usually inundated with motorcycle accidents as people crush their rib cage on the handlebars of their dirt bike because they got a little too airborne. So is that what you're referring to in that caveat?
Yeah. So, but in general, you believe that it is a right, not a privilege. So if
right,
it
I
is
believe the hospital should not be able to turn you away.
Okay. So do you believe that it is a right? Okay, let me think of how to rephrase this question. Sorry.
I still think
Knowing
they should have to pay
that-
for it. Let me say that.
Knowing that medical costs are a hindrance and a preventative measure from the majority of people seeking health help, do you believe that it is a fundamental right to health insurance or health coverage?
Yes and no, and that's where it gets complicated. In my opinion, I think everybody should receive medical treatment. That or everybody should at least have that readily available to them. Obviously, people are going to make their own health choices, and whether or not they want to seek medical treatment is their own decision. However, when it comes to health insurance, by default, the definition for insurance, I guess, I think is going to vary from person to person. I think privatized insurance is not a right from that perspective, but I think that I'm personally okay with the government having a baseline health insurance available to all, regardless of pre-existing conditions, that will keep people from going absolutely bankrupt because of the medical conditions that they have.
So fundamentally then, correct me if I'm wrong,
Okay.
you are okay with a universal healthcare plan with the option for people to purchase their own if they would like to and have the means to.
Yes, there are definitely some caveats to my perspective on that, but yes, I would say to me, it makes sense. I understand that's a very socialized point of view, and it's not one of my more commonly common directions I push with my leaning politics. But I think there should be some baseline, something available. I think it should. I think people should pay for that from a out of their taxes. I don't think you should be the typical U.S. cost for health insurance is about $10,000 a year. For Canadians, it's about $7,000 a year that the government spends. So even if we lower that standard from the $10,000 people pay in the U.S. to $7,000 Canadian, if you're getting a tax return for $4,000 or $5,000, which a lot of people are, I think that should go towards your healthcare. If you're using government subsidized or government set up healthcare, because people are paying for it one way or the other. I think that should be paid for. If you're going to use the government version of healthcare, I think you should pay for it as kind of like right out of your social security is taken out of your check. I think your health insurance should be taken out of your check if that's the route you choose to go.
Well, this is going to be a very interesting and short conversation. And the reason I say that is because we actually, the reason I ask this question is because it's important to gauge where people are as far as our right is concerned. And we're very similar. Cryo, what are your feelings on this? Do you have any dissenting views on this?
I'm basically the same as Zach. You should not be denied ever.
Well, that's great because it sets a baseline where we can all go from, right? And it's fine to disagree about specifics, but if we can get the general down, I think that's a step forward, right?
Yeah.
And so if we can all agree that there should be at the base level a type of universal healthcare that covers people that can't afford it at the base level, then that's wonderful. You mentioned taxes and how much it's going to cost. I actually, in preparation, brought that up. And so I'm glad you brought that up.
I want to know. I want to know in your opinion, because so here's what my fear is in a universal healthcare system, right? As someone who lives in California, someone who I have a very long, pull out the world's smallest violin, give you this long and sad story where my child, one of my children, had brain cancer when he was 4 months old, and the treatment he received, there's no way I could have afforded it at the time. I would argue that there's probably 1.2, 1.4 million spent on him in healthcare costs in a 4 to 6 month period. of him having emergency brain surgery and then chemotherapy and all of these different things. That was paid for by California Children's Services, which is a branch of Medi-Cal specifically for children, obviously. But in his particular case, because of his particularly rare cancer condition, they said, hey, we will cover 100% of that. So I didn't pay a dime for his medical care. So I did not go into, extraordinary amounts of debt for that, which is a huge blessing for me. And so that's why part of me is like, yeah, I understand where it makes sense because I've experienced it. And I understand how that makes sense. At the same time, I also, some of the caveats I have to that program are, I think you should be paying taxes in order to use that program.
Right. And so let's get into the money real quick to answer that question, because I think I have an answer to that question.
Okay.
And follow me if you disagree. Let me know. But let me get to the end because I'm going to go off of multiple websites. Okay. First one is CRFB. It's the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget. It's a nonpartisan. It's a bipartisan. Political group that estimated the cost of Medicare for all, right, or universal health care coverage. They said over a decade, it will cost between 28 and $32 trillion. That boils down to between 2.8 or $3.2 trillion. I would like to just agree on $3 trillion. It's literally right in the middle. $3 trillion a year, right? Wonderful. Now, looking at the Statista.com, the statistics for everything, one of the things they did was how much Medicare on its own currently costs. We are currently spending $925 billion per year on Medicare. Okay. Combine that with Medicaid. For those that are not familiar with Medicaid, Medicaid is the federally subsidized health insurance you can currently get if you are low income in every state. Certain states have different criteria and cover more. California covers has one of the largest groups of it. The total cost for the Medicaid portion of it, right? Just the federal government portion of it, it is $661 billion per year. That brings it up to $1.5 trillion per year. So we're already at half the cost of what it would cost to cover Medicare for all. Okay. So we good so far?
I think so. We're jumping around and we're throwing a lot of numbers there. I actually did pull up the CRFB website, and I don't know if you saw below that the policymakers listed a combination of approaches that they said would pay for it. Did you see that portion?
I did. I don't necessarily like where they're going with it, which is why I'm throwing up my own.
Okay, go ahead. Keep going then.
So between Medicare and Medicaid, because again, this is going to be healthcare that will cover everybody. So those parties are included. That spending should go to Medicare for all. So now we have 1.5 trillion, which covers
conversation. I got to step away for a second. Sorry.
No problem. 1.5 trillion covers half of the 3 trillion costs, right? Moving on to sjp.fas.org website. It's a Congressional Research Service. They did a study of how much the average cost for private insurance is and the percentage of population that has private health insurance. Okay. I don't know if I can share my screen to bring it up. I don't believe I have that option. That's right. Looking at private health insurance for groups, there's 177 million people that are paying, and they average per year $1,151. When you multiply that by 177 million, you now get the other $1.5 trillion when you combine private insurance. So what I was getting at is when you look at how much it costs private citizens, again, that's going to be 54.5% of the US population. And then you could even add in the other 10.5% that have private health insurance that's in a non-group, right? That cost of their insurance, along with the cost for Medicare and the cost for Medicaid, would cover the estimated cost for Medicare for all, meaning there would be a net zero increase in taxes because what you are paying in your health insurance would then go to pay for that. Now, if you want to buy private insurance on top of that, that is on you, and you can definitely pay for it if you have the money. But what you're already paying for your health insurance would still be taken out of your check, but it would go towards.
See, I don't like that. I don't like that from the perspective of I now have to pay what I was already paying to get the government healthcare, and now I have to pay on top of that to keep the healthcare that I wanted.
Correct.
That's what you're suggesting.
Yes, because you don't have to keep what you don't have to keep what you have. You can go with the government version, which is just as good.
See, I would and this is where I think we have a differing opinion here, and I have some concerns with it in that I don't have the extra money just lying around to pay an additional what I'm already paying on top of that for my health insurance on a monthly basis. I already pay for. Right. And I'm already paying for my private health insurance. So now you're telling me that, hey, we're going to keep paying what you're going to have to keep paying that same amount of money, which I was paying a premium over what the government cost of Medi-Cal or Medicare, Medicaid, whatever you want to call it. But we're going to now add an additional cost on that. That just seems, I don't know, it seems rather extravagant in terms of cost to get government subsidized healthcare. Again,
let me rephrase that, okay? Because again, this is you're paying $1,151 per year. I do not pay that. I pay far more than that. So if it would go down, so this would actually mean you're only going to be paying $1,151 more towards your universal health care, okay, right? Which averages out to about $100 a month, about $100 because it's just under $1,200, right?
Okay,
it's rounded up to $1,200. It's just about $100 a month.
So you're saying
far more,
but that's per person,
for health
right?
Insurance. That is per person, but I
so
still
then
pay
my family
far more
of 5
than that per person. Mm-hmm.
So my family of 5, I'm gonna have to pay an extra $500 a month for health insurance that I don't even want, and I want to replace with a good health insurance, not one run by the same people that run the DMV.
I love how people always bring up the DMV as
because I hate it. I hate the DMV. I hate the U.S. Postal Service.
Everybody hates the DMV, but no one ever brings up, Social Security. Everyone loves Social Security, which is socialism run by the.
I don't like Social Security either.
Government. Really?
Yeah, I know. Not a fan.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, Zach doesn't like Social Security government runs. So
well, yeah, pretty much. That's
really
kind of how the way it works. Like I prefer FedEx to USPS. I prefer basically anything over the DMV. Like, I mean, I'd rather go get a tooth pulled than go to the DMV. I'm not a fan of the DMV. Granted, maybe that's just mine. My DMV is a hot pile of garbage and a cesspool of infection. Kind of like the local hospital too. But
here's my issue. Here's my issue with healthcare in general being privatized. It bothers me that to make a profit, we need to limit services, life-saving services or life-changing services to someone to turn a profit.
It's still a business at the end of the day.
Healthcare a business, and a business's job is to make money, not make people better.
Correct.
When you remove that aspect of it, it's no longer a business. You can move toward making people better. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because according to WebMD, right, they did Health Insurance News, and they did something on top 11 wealthiest countries who had the best health insurance and health care overall, and we ranked dead last.
I would argue against that in that people come to the US to get medical procedures because we have the best doctors in the world. We might not have the best healthcare system, but we have the best doctors in the world because they can make the most money here. we have more opportunity because of capitalism for them to make more money. So therefore, the best doctors are available to us here.
I think we lost.
That is my. So what?
Neil's frozen up.
Yeah, Neil froze again.
Hey,
Neil, we can't hear you, buddy.
I'm hearing bits and pieces of him.
Yeah, I'm just your connection shows your internet connection is garbage, which means I automatically win the argument because I have better internet connection. Not quite. You there, Neil?
I'm trying to be, but it's saying no.
I can hear you now.
But it's kind of still sounds like a robot. Oh, and he's gone. Okay. Well, I'm continuing the conversation here. While we're waiting on him to get back, I do have some serious concerns about that. Primarily, he did bring up the it's the CRFB website, which you can go to crfb.org. If you just Google crfb.org or CRFB and then Medi-Cal for all. There is an
and we're back.
There we go. Document listing some different medical choices here. And particularly the CRFB listed out that would require for their $30 trillion 10-year plan, the equivalent of a 32% payroll tax, 25% income surtax, and a $7,500 per capita mandatory public premium, which is rough in terms of out-of-pocket cost. At $7,500, it's like $600 a month that it would legitimately cost per person to properly run this, and that's where the costs skyrocket quickly when we look at that. So those are the paying for it. Like again, I think everybody should be able to receive treatment. But I think so realistically, being someone who's worked in the medical field, I can tell you for a fact, all of the prices that you get, if you say, hey, I'm going to pay cash for my medical procedure, right? The cash price that they quote you is massively overinflated and negotiable. You tell a hospital, hey, yeah, I'm not going to pay you $8,000 for that. I'll give you $5,000. They'll probably say, you know what, we can do $6,000. Happens all the time.
And it's still more than insurance is paid, because insurance is paying notoriously 40% or less of what the listed cost is. And to make up, because they're a business, they inflate the prices for people that don't have insurance or can't afford insurance, which again is why, and again, according to the statistics showing why we're one of the worst, over 50% of people that are low income list healthcare cost expenses as a reason why they don't seek help.
And so hear me out though.
High.
But what ends up happening is they still end up going to the hospital when they get critically ill, and then they get the bill and they pay nothing, which those costs are then passed on to those paying medical insurance, those paying cash payments, because the hospital has to pay cash payments. Say what?
It's primarily passed on to those paying cash payments.
Well, they yes, there is some that definitely hits that, but they're within the insurance companies that they bring up that standardized pricing. Hey, we're expecting to give away basically 8 of these surgeries for free this month, so I now have to bump up my prices by 3% to try to offset that versus my actual cost, right? And the hospital is going to make a little bit of money off the insurance company. They're probably going to make more off of the cash buyer, particularly the cash buyer that pays full price. Because honestly, I would argue that probably 90% of the population, or if not more, does not know that the prices you get from the hospital, that hospital bill, is negotiable. Most people don't understand that.
It also depends on when you get the bill and when you call to pay it. Because if you don't call to pay it right away, it's no longer with the hospital. It's with the collection agency, and that's a lot more different because they definitely are 100% profit and they want to make money. But before I cut off because my internet hates me. You said that we have the best doctors and that's why people come here for surgery.
Yeah.
That could easily be said of literally every other country. Do you know people go to Mexico daily for surgery, dental, and cosmetic?
Not because it's the best, because it's cheap. I have a guy that's going down to Mexico. He's like, hey, my wife got discounted LASIK surgery down there for both eyes for $600. Now, let me ask you this though. What he said is she had it done 4 years ago. I was like, oh, why did you wait before having it done? Why did you wait 4 years if she had it done 4 years ago? It's like, oh, we wanted to make sure it worked out because we weren't super confident about it. And the only reason they felt comfortable doing it is his wife is from Mexico and she has family down there. And she's like, hey, I know of this doctor. Supposedly he's good. And so they did hers. They waited 4 years to make sure it all worked out fine. And then he's going down and he's just doing one eye to make sure that he doesn't go blind. And that one heals up fine. And then he'll go back and do the other one. Because he doesn't trust him, because he knows it's heavily discounted. And the only reason he's going down there, though, is because it's dirt cheap.
It's heavily discounted to him because he's paying in US dollar, which is more than the Mexican peso.
That's fair.
The other thing with that as well is when you look at the doctors and their record, and again, saying it's the best doctor, a lot of it is subjective because some would argue that some of the best doctors are in the UK and in the UAE, not here.
That's fair. And there are plenty of doctors that work out in the jungle that are better at saving people's lives because they have limited tools and limited resources and make it happen anyways.
And when you look at, again, cosmetic surgery, especially when it comes to like bariatric surgery, some of the best bariatric surgeons are in Mexico, not across the border in TJ, but when you go to Cozumel, Cancun, and they make plans to make it an entire 2 to 3 week vacation for you for the cost that includes the bariatric surgery and the private nurses along with your room. And the reason they can do that is because the US dollar is so much more than the Mexican peso. So what it would cost you for the surgery here from your doctor at, and I'm going to say Kaiser because I have Kaiser and nothing against Kaiser. Kaiser is wonderful and they've been great to me and my family, right? But for what it costs to get a bariatric surgery done at Kaiser, if it's an elective surgery, to what it would cost in Mexico, you can get it done by a doctor who is at least as good, if not better, on paper than the doctors here in California, and get a vacation out of it.
I would argue that you're right, but I would also argue that that doctor could make, if they're actually that good, they can make way more money doing it here in the U.S. And that's why a lot of them move here, because they can, and they come here to get their medical training. They come here to, which is fair, right?
Well, it depends on where they go and what they're going for, right? Because a lot of doctors that have medical training don't have their residency here. It's a lot cheaper and easier, not easier, but cheaper to go to Mexico City. But if you're specializing in something that's done at a teaching hospital like UCSF or UC Davis, UCNY, right? You're going to go there because you're training in something specific. So you want to have a residency there and it's more prestigious. You also mentioned money. Money is great, yes. However, it takes a long time. We're talking 10 plus years for you to get your tenure in to start making dollars. And you have a fuck ton of liability insurance you have to pay, right? Not so in other countries, right? So you look at other countries that have universal healthcare, right? Their liability insurance is a fraction of the cost of what doctors pay here. So when you look at how much doctors make in a different country, on paper, yeah, the gross number looks a lot less. But when you look at what they take home, it's fairly comparable because they don't have a lot of the expenses the doctors have here.
What is the liability insurance that the doctors have to have?
In case they make a mistake in surgery and somebody dies, they have to have, or has some other serious negative side effect.
Cut off the wrong foot.
That's what I thought. Yeah. So they don't have to have that as these other.
We in the United States, it's lawsuit happy. We sue people for anything. If you have cosmetic surgery and it doesn't look exactly like they promised that it would, you can sue the doctor. If you go in, to be fair, some doctors deserve to be sued for some of the treatment that they give people.
100%
there's definitely that definitely deserves to happen. As an example, there was a patient that we were transporting from one hospital to the other because that hospital had given them garbage treatment. That person had their hand bitten off and it was just dangling by some skin by their horse bit it. Turns out the horse had a version of horse Alzheimer's, essentially. Forgot who she was. Got scared, bit the hand, and it was just dangling off. And that hospital did nothing to provide treatment. Like she sat in the ER for a solid 6.5 hours. The hand started to go black. And then so we showed up, transported her to a different hospital. She ended up only losing, I think, her pinky and like half of her thumb, because they were able to reattach the hand to her femoral artery to give it blood flow, to get it back up and running. But she sued the crap out of that first hospital for letting her sit there for 6.5 hours and doing nothing.
That, yeah.
Right. So the hospital had to have liability insurance because she basically just sat in the ER. But each individual doctor, if you go to the doctor and the doctor says, hey, yeah, you're fine, you don't need any medication, what you're having, there is a word, it's called angina. Angina is basically heart pain that feels like a heart attack, but it's not really a heart attack. If you go to your doctor, he's, oh, it's just angina. You're fine. You don't need any medication for your heart. And then you go home and have a heart attack and die. That family could sue you as a doctor for millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And people do that every day in the US. Every single day, because we readily have access to lawyers and we are a lawsuit happy country.
Yeah.
That's not a problem in other countries. People don't sue their doctor constantly.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, did you guys hear about that couple that went to what was it, the fertility clinic, tried to have a little girl, and the fertility clinic promised them that they would have a girl, had a boy, and now they're suing the fertility clinic?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, because
at the same time, there's that doctor who was supposedly helping them have IVF with mom and dad and put his own stuff into the mix, and the doctor had like 300 kids on record or something like that. Yeah, that guy got sued. Actually, he's going to jail, I think.
That was one of those cut to ancestry DNA.
About.
Yeah.
Okay. So the one with wanting a boy, being told you're going to get a boy, and then getting a girl. The reason we have a lawsuit there is because now they can genetically manipulate the egg to be either male or female. So you are supposed to get what you pay for. They can genetically manipulate if it's going to be a boy or girl, blonde hair, blue eyes, or blue hair. Blue eyes, black hair. They can
not with 100% accuracy.
They can, but it's not legal in the US.
Right. And so
that's the key. You're not legally allowed to do that in the US with that
because
level
there's
of
some
manipulation.
ethics, some morality behind it. Whatever, that's bullshit. You should
They
get what you pay
don't.
for, right?
They don't know what they're doing. If we're being really honest, they just barely finished mapping the genome, so they don't even know.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, if I change this one, yeah, it turned out to be a blue-eyed baby, but like, did you also give the kid cancer when he turns, when he hits puberty, and all of a sudden something starts going crazy out of whack? Like, they don't know.
Right. So there's a standing there because at the very base, you can predetermine a gender without getting into the gender debate.
Yeah, I think that's pretty. I think it's pretty standard at this point.
Right. Back to the malpractice thing, though. Think about it from this perspective with universal healthcare, right? If you're a doctor and we have universal healthcare, you are effectively a government employee. Mm-hmm. What happens when you sue a government employee? You're effectively suing the government, right?
Yeah.
So they don't have to pay for that insurance because they're covered because they're a government employee. You'd have to sue the government for fucking up, not that doctor. Now you can civilly sue the doctor, right? In a civil lawsuit, but those are capped at like 10 grand, right? So you're not going to take them to malpractice because you'd be suing the government for malpractice, not necessarily that doctor.
You ain't going to get shit from the government.
See,
exactly,
I think we would have to change that because you still need to be able to sue an individual doctor at this point for significant malpractice issues, and there should still be criminal liabilities for, you amputate the wrong foot, you shouldn't be able to practice anymore.
Criminal liabilities is different, right? Criminal liabilities isn't necessarily a malpractice lawsuit or a civil lawsuit. That's criminal charges brought by the DA. That's enough. Different. So for sure, if you're killing people incorrectly, which there was nurses that were doing around. I remember that nurse that was going around killing people in nursing homes because he felt he was doing them a favor because no one was coming to visit them. So he was upping their medication and killing them. Yeah, it was New Jersey, New York. Don't quote me on the state, but yeah, he worked at like 3 nursing homes, killed like 30 something people. Definitely should go to jail, right? 100%. I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that. But again, that's a criminal lawsuit. That's going to be brought up by the DA. That is not a malpractice lawsuit and is not a civil lawsuit. So the other thing you can do, even without changing the way the medical practice works here currently, you could do a lot by just capping how much you could sue a doctor for. Then you've now put a price on what someone's body is. right?
I
Which
mean,
some people say isn't fair, but at the same time, isn't that what hospitals do on a fucking daily basis?
and that's what insurance companies do when they say they will or won't pay for a
Right.
procedure. Happens all the time. At the end of the day, the money can't just be printed. Well, I want to say the money can't be just printed out of nowhere, but that's what we've been doing for the last 2 years, and
Yeah.
we've
You
been
can
printing
just
more
mine
money
it.
than
We'll go to crypto, go back and watch the first podcast. We'll go to crypto, we'll just mine it, and it'll be fine. See, back to that.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I again, this is where I come back to it. I think everybody is everybody should be given healthcare in that if you show up to the hospital and you need health, you need help, you should have that readily available to you. I think the term health insurance for all is something we should move away from. In that I think we should simply look to lower the cost of individual procedures, from a perspective of,
Well, they're jacking up the prices anyway.
If you're going to tell me that you need to charge me $500 a month for health insurance, like let's just back that train up, like way up, and say, okay, well, why don't we build out maybe more of an emergency system where you say, okay, I'm only going to charge you $100 a month for your entire family, $20 a month per person. But now there's a cap where you can't owe more than, I don't know, $50,000 in medical debt. That's a car. That's realistically, that's a new SUV. That's a car payment. So we're saying you can't have more than a car payment's worth of medical debt. It's $20 a month. And beyond that, we're going to take it out of Jeff Bezos' bank account. I don't know. That sounds terrible socialism. Yeah. Beyond that, I don't know the fix, if I'll be honest. But I think that, there's the cap. That's the insurance. That's what the $20 a month goes to cover, is if you have something catastrophic happen to you beyond that $50,000 in debt that you need covered. And then all of the preventative care that you would normally get is now cheaper. So instead of, normal, smaller copays where you can afford to go to the doctor and say, hey, it'll be, 30, 40, $50 to go see your general practitioner and have an appointment and go see the doctor, and limit the total amount. Cause that's realistically why people don't go in. It's they're afraid, I may or may not have had a heart attack. So I'm not going to go into the hospital and have it checked, because they're afraid of hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical bills. And that's always what you hear about in the news. Oh, hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical bills. But realistically, yeah, that's because it is pretty common. And that's where I say, I think that car payment amount of debt seems to be about the limit that people can technically afford. It's a lot, but that would be a pretty rough scenario. And the default for the hospital, in my opinion, in those scenarios should be a payment plan. Not here's your $50,000 in medical debt. It's all right, cool. This was legitimately the cheapest price we could afford for you. And I think the government has the ability, which they've been talking about doing, the government being able to negotiate prices with pharmaceutical companies and hospitals, negotiate for the cheapest price that they can possibly get. And then that cheapest price you can possibly get would be the extra that you'd be paying. And the default should be a payment plan that makes it easy to pay off. But at the end of the day, the cost, if you have more medical problems, you're going to have to pay more.
Oh, okay. Running with this, I'm not saying I agree with it, but running with this theory, right? Running with this idea.
Okay.
We'll even stick with the 50K. You owe 50 grand. Okay. And hospitals are going to go with a payment plan. Are we going to then treat them like a rent-a-center or one of those loan services and cap what the interest rate they can charge you is? Because
0% interest. Zero interest. Doesn't matter.
How are you going to make a company charge someone 0% interest? Because again, these hospitals are private companies and they're a business. So how are you going to make a business charge 0%?
Because so here's the thing, and this is my opinion. That's what they currently do right now. If you go to the hospital and say, hey, I can't afford to pay you $20,000 for that whatever I just had surgery, but I can do a payment plan and I can afford $100 a month. Okay, you're gonna be paying on that for what, 15 years, something like that.
Mhm.
Most hospitals will tell you, all right, cool, we'll take $100 from you for the next 15 years with no interest. I've never heard of one requiring interest to be charged. They just want to get money out of you. They don't care how long it takes to get their money out of you. They just want to be able to put it on paper that says, these are my liabilities. These are what's supposed to be coming in payments. And then that you actually pay it. And then if you don't, they're just going to send you off to collections. They're going to collect 50% of that from the collections agency. Collections agency is going to say, hey, this is $10,000 in medical debt. I'll pay you, $4,000 or $5,000. And then they go and they call you and they get at least 8 or 9 out of you at the end of the day. Right?
They don't pay that much.
You
You do, real quick, when people buy medical debt specifically, they usually pay 1 penny for every dollar, 1 penny or less per dollar owed in medical debt. I don't know if you're aware of that or not, but in general, when a debt collector, because they buy that debt. So if I'm a hospital and I have $100,000, and so if you're a hospital and you have $100,000 in debt and I'm a bill collector and you are going to write that off, because essentially you're writing off that debt, right? Which is what someone to get back to. You're going to write that debt off and I'm going to buy it from you on pennies on the dollar. Literally, it's usually around 1 penny per dollar. So I'm going to be spending
the medical debt
$1,000 to get $100,000 from you. So if I can settle that $100,000 debt for $10,000, of course, because I just made $9,000 on a $1,000 investment. You know what I mean? So of course that makes sense from a bill collector perspective.
Anyway.
So here's what I was going to get at. I'm sorry to get you off, but because you said you're going to negotiate and lower the cost of all the prices, we're going to lower how much you pay health insurance. These are businesses, you've now effectively lowered all of their revenue coming in, and then you're not going to allow them to charge interest on a loan that they're giving people. That seems from a business perspective.
Have I really lowered revenue if people are actually paying? Because you went from all of these people not paying and it going off to debt collections to them actually paying.
Yes, and the reason why is because right now, and we're going to go with it, $10,000 because math is hard for me, and this is going to be really easy with the round numbers, even numbers, okay?
Yep.
If you have a procedure that costs $10,000 at the hospital, right? On average, insurance companies pay 40% of that, which is $4,000, okay? If you've now said the government is going to negotiate the lowest price, we're not going to lower that down to $4,000 because that's the lowest price. Insurance companies are still only going to pay 40% of that. Right. So now you've gone from making $4,000 on a $10,000 procedure to making $1,500, $1,800, whatever 40% is, off of a $4,000 procedure. So the same procedure that was netting you $4,000 every time from insurance is now letting you less than $2,000 because the price of what you can charge, because the government, you said the government's going to negotiate. So the government's now said this is as much as you can charge on it now. So the price is going to go down.
No.
Insurance companies.
Hold on. Back up. Back this train, because I think that's a bad train of thought to go on. I'm not saying that the government should set the price of a surgery like they're setting the price price of milk. The gallon of milk costs the same, or it's supposed to be set.
Okay, because that's where I was getting confused. That's what I thought I was hearing you say.
No.
Okay.
So I'm saying,
clarify for me.
Is that the government currently is like the largest purchaser of certain medications for like veterans.
The largest insurer right now between Medicaid and Medicare, they cover over 50% of Americans. And
currently the way the system's set up is the hospitals just tell them how much it costs and they pay it.
No, they don't. No, they do not. The government does not pay that. The government is a health insurance, and the government, especially when it comes to Medicare pays 38% of what is charged.
So hear me out. Hear me out. They're not negotiating with that total cost. They're just saying the hospital says it's $10,000 for that procedure. Then okay, the government's not saying, did it really cost that much, or did it only cost $4,000?
Correct. Because Medicare, the government says we are paying you this. We don't give a shit what you're charging. We are going to pay you this.
So what I'm saying is that whatever system we set up here with this, whatever fees we're talking about, if you have emergency surgery that costs $10,000, you're paying your $20 a month into the system. You're getting taxed normally. We're pulling money out of your tax because you're here. That's a whole other conversation of I live in Southern California, where we have a lot of people in the area that are in the area illegally. that's a whole other conversation for another day. I know they don't pay taxes. They don't pay into the systems that we're using. They're not going to end up paying a bill because they don't have a social security number. So they don't care about a credit score. They're just going to show up. They're going to get their medical treatment. They're going to leave. That's a whole other conversation. But the point being here that you're just laughing away. It's just fair. It's a whole other conversation. I'm trying not to go down that rabbit hole right now. Again, this is where I say everybody should be able to pay into it. Everybody that should have access to this sort of health insurance that is paying taxes is kind of how I caveated that conversation very early on. I see you moved your boom mic now. Now I want to hear what you're saying.
Okay, you know how hard it is for me to bite my tongue on this, right? Because
Okay.
we say people that are here illegally, I'm assuming you're talking about illegal immigrants, correct? Undocumented citizens, whatever you want to call them, right?
Correct. Whether they be here, well, and hear me out, whether they be here on a visa, they're a traveling student, they're someone just visiting from out of the country. I don't think they should have access to our healthcare system, or at least our healthcare insurance. So if you're someone, if I'm a tourist from the UK, I come to the US, I'm in a big car accident, I don't expect that person to be covered by our health insurance. Right. So I still think they should be able to receive medical treatment, but their medical bills are their problem.
So real quick, you live in California just like I do, right?
Yep.
Perfect. We have Medi-Cal. It's a subsidiary of Medicaid. It's somewhat funded by federal government, but a lot of it is funded from taxes in the state of California.
Yes.
Do you know where those taxes come from?
I'm assuming that a bunch of it comes from me, a taxpayer, because I pay taxes in the state of California.
Income tax?
I pay income tax, yes. I pay sales tax. I pay
primarily sales tax. And so that's what I was getting at. People that are here illegally pay sales tax.
Okay.
So
so you're saying that California has their own separate system that is funded separately.
Actually, I know we do.
Somewhat separately.
I know we do. And the reason why I know that is because that's part of what I do. But yeah,
okay.
Medi-Cal.
So then let me preface then my conversation for this being a federally funded program.
Okay, that's fair.
Because every state might have something different going on. Obviously, California, they pay for theirs differently. I would argue that whatever we're doing isn't working, because all I heard from our local hospitals on a frequent basis is that they have a lot of people that show up that don't pay their medical bills. That's part of why we haven't been able to expand our hospital. And the part of it is, according to them, there are a lot of people that come in, they don't have a social security number, that are getting medical treatment. And we ask them for contact information so that we can send them a bill. And they're like, I don't live here. I don't know what you're talking about. Good luck sending me a bill. And we end up with one hospital in the area where we should have three, and our hospital's massively overwhelmed. And we keep having to ask for extra funding from federal government, from state government, because of the issues that we have. That's a whole other issue. This is a long rabbit trail, and I don't remember where we started on this rabbit trail. I lost my train of thought on paying for this, and now I'm stuck on is people paying into the system. If you're gonna have a mandatory system that everybody's using, everybody has to pay into it. So however you choose to fund that, whether that be sales tax or income tax or whatever, anybody who has access to it has to be paying into it in that way. I don't know that sales tax is necessarily the right way to pay for that, considering that I could, if let's magically say California ups their sales tax to 20%, and we take that extra 10% and build the best medical system in the world with our sales tax, best medical system in the world. Well, I know that, and I live in Arizona. I can just come across the border and get medical treatment over here, right? And not pay a dime into it. And that system would quickly get overwhelmed because people would come here, not have to pay a dime into the sales tax, and take advantage of that. And I say that people would do that in a heartbeat because I know people will take advantage of anything given to them.
Oh yeah.
Currently happens. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there was an issue with Nevada. Since you work in the medical field, I don't know if you read about this or heard about this. Nevada, one of their ways to deal with the homeless population and with the mentally ill was when they went to the hospital, after they were done, they would put them on a bus and ship them to San Francisco or Sacramento. And the reason why is because they're going to get medical care, and we have a better system for the homeless population. We have a lot of homeless population, but we do have a better system for it.
Yeah, no, and 100%, and that's part of why California is getting overwhelmed with an increasing homeless population. Our homeless population continues to be increased. It's becoming a significant issue where they're not getting the treatment that they need, both mental health treatment. They're sleeping on the sidewalks in downtown LA. It's becoming more and more unsafe for people in their homes, because these people, majority, I think the last study I saw was like 85% of people that are homeless have a mental health issue. So I don't think we don't have an issue we don't have a homelessness crisis. We have a mental health crisis that we have allowed to sleep on our streets outside at night. I don't know what the right solution is on that. That's a whole other thing, but there is medical care involved in that. And I think it legitimately is a mental health issue where people cannot, we're talking about spending billions of dollars in mental health, in building housing for the homeless here in Southern California. The problem is we've done that before. We give people a home, an apartment, a place to stay, and we tell them, hey, you can only stay here if you can stay clean. You can be off your drugs, be off your alcohol, whatever, and they can't do it. Within a couple of days, they're back out on the street because they're like, I can't. I'm addicted to whatever drug they're on, whatever alcohol they're intaking. They have to be on it, and that's I think that's part of their mental health issue, is their addiction there. And then the ones, some of the times the ones that do stay, absolutely trash the place that they're in, and that housing gets absolutely destroyed. Holes in the walls, doors torn down, because there are significant mental health issues present. They're not able to fit into a normal life cycle that the rest of the population does. And so spending billions of dollars to house them, I don't think is the correct solution. But if I could say, I honestly couldn't tell you what the correct solution is, other than we used to have mental health facilities and we don't anymore.
Well, let me jump in on that thing, because I know everything. I know the solution, right?
Right.
No, because I don't know the solution, but I do know that a proper mental health diagnosis would help, right? So getting the proper diagnosis would help. You mentioned the facilities where we house them and help get them clean. I'm not going to argue, because there are instances where they keep going back, and there is a horrible turnaround cycle in that, and a lot of them do get trashed. But I do think it's important to mention that there are some facilities that work very, very well in that. They have a lot more support. The ones I'm thinking of specifically allow the children to stay with them, so they don't lose their kids. They're going through rehab with their kids. They're also getting on-site psych evaluations and therapy sessions, right? There's a lot of help that goes into it. They're a lot more expensive to run because they're getting a lot more help, but they also end up being a lot more successful. Those, unfortunately, are few and far between. But so I do also agree that this would definitely be a great conversation, the homeless population and how to solve it.
I honestly, I
clue,
haven't heard a good solution to it in the several different arguments. I mean, that's a common political talking point here in California right now, and
yes.
it's one of our number one reason people are leaving California is they used to live in a nice neighborhood, and now there's homeless people at every corner, and they're like, I don't know what to do about that. I don't have the answer for fixing it, but I do believe that the answer for fixing that has a large, significant focus on mental health issues, because I really do believe there are a lot of the vast majority of the homeless population has a mental health issue and isn't going to be able to reintegrate into society just because you gave them a free haircut and gave them a place to sleep for 6 months. That's not going to fix their issue.
On the moving out because of homeless, I just had to say, because you live in California with me, and I'm assuming you've been to San Francisco.
Oh yeah.
So you can appreciate this. Do you know that there's now a website showing you where not to go because the homeless situation is so bad that there's like feces on the sidewalks, and there's homeless camps in certain streets? So they tell you there's like a map of Frisco of where not to go, so you can enjoy Frisco without the homeless population.
Did you see that they took parks and parking lots within San Francisco and turned them into homeless encampments, where they brought in porta potties and said, hey, you can legally now sleep here in these public places within the city of San Francisco, and we're not going to show up and arrest you for being, vagrants or whatever they want to call it. We're not going to tell you have to move on or move out. We're going to turn over our public spaces that were designed for parking or parks or families or whatever you want to call it. But those public spaces are now being designated as homeless safety encampments or whatever they're calling them.
I'm not saying I agree with it, because I don't agree with it, but I can at least understand it, because if you were to arrest every homeless person in San Francisco, you would vastly overwhelm the jail system and not have any room for actual criminals, right? And I'm not saying because to me being homeless isn't a criminal. It doesn't make you a criminal. I'm not saying you're not a criminal, but being homeless doesn't make you a criminal. But if you were to arrest all of them and house them for loitering, you would have no room. Right.
Because so my argument to that is it's because we let it get this bad. We didn't do that when people started showing up, and now it's gotten so bad that there's not enough room to do it. If we had, if every time a homeless person, go ahead.
Frisco has a housing issue because where are you going to build? Frisco is the only city, the city county, right? It's a city and it's its own county, and it's what, 6 miles by 1 mile. That's it, and it's completely densely populated with homes. Where would you build aside from up? And that's not the smartest thing to do, considering that it's next to a fault line. So, you know what I mean?
No, it's true. It's true.
They reached their maximum population decades ago, and people keep fucking moving in. So, unless you're going to turn every home into a quadruplex and rent out each,
which they're trying to do,
right? Well,
they're going to turn it into New York City here pretty soon. I mean, you look at New York City, and then you got these tiny little apartments that are like all of 100 square feet, and then like you can't even stand upright in.
If I owned a home in Frisco, first off, I'd sell it because fuck it, I'd be a millionaire. But last time I checked, I want to say it was something around 3,000 square feet was what the real estate in Frisco was going for, right? No, not that, maybe $300 a square foot, because you could get like $3,000 a month for like a little tiny ass 500 square foot closet in Frisco. It's something ridiculously insane.
Yeah,
it's one of the highest, if not the highest, it's one of the highest housing markets, especially for renting, is in the country, let alone the state.
100%. And LA isn't that bad, but it's bad. I have a friend who just sold his house up here where I live an hour and a half north of LA. He just sold his 1,400 square foot house for $440K, and bought a 800 square foot 800 square foot townhome in Pacoima for $420K, which is San Fernando Valley. It's basically LA. So he moved an hour. For him, it cut his drive time to work from like an hour and a half each way to like 15 minutes. Like he's right up the street from, and guess you wouldn't guess where he works. Can you guess where he works?
I'm drawing a blank now.
Kaiser.
Speaking of health insurance, that's awesome.
But that's, I mean, we're talking 800 square feet for $420K is crazy money. And I'm talking like I was just talking housing prices with a friend that lives in Texas. And I told him how big my house is and how much it's worth right now. And he's just like, you could have a mansion out here. Like you could have a massive home in Texas. Like I was looking at selling my place and moving to Texas, and I can move out to a place that's 2,800 square feet on 20 acres for the same cost.
Do me a favor before you do that. Make sure you look at how much the property tax is, because it changes by county, and you'll be surprised at the how much the property tax is. Some counties have like an 18% property tax, and so that'll fucking kill you.
Oh yeah, but at least I'll make up for it because I'm not going to be paying 27 cents a kilowatt hour for my electricity.
You would think. I'm just saying, like when you look at pure housing costs, like everyone's like, oh, it's cheaper in Texas, until you get fucked over by the property taxes.
And property values are already increasing there too.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, there are some counties in Texas that do not have fuck you over property rates, right? But most places like that, no one wants to go to because it's fucking nothing. Where if you want to actually have some sort of civilization, exactly, if you want to have some type of civilization, you're going to have cheaper than California prices, but much more expensive property taxes.
Correct. So, which, because they don't fund their things through other things like 10% sales tax, and it at the end of the day, I would argue that cost of living in Texas is still significantly cheaper. That has been studied. However, However,
Nevada's
to your
better.
point,
That's what I was gonna get at.
there is that cost. It's just the cost is different. You can't just show up and immediately assume that one thing that costs the same here just because its price is cheaper, that means that your total cost is going to be cheaper. I'm assuming insurance prices in Texas are different than they are in California too.
Correct. And that's what happens to a lot of people that move from California to Texas is they assume the price is just going to be cheaper and then they're going to pay the same property tax and it's all going to be roses. And they're like, well, fuck, I bought way out of my league because I didn't expect the property taxes to continue to be this way. But that's what I was going to say. Nevada, if you're looking to move, I don't want to move out of California, but Nevada doesn't have either of that shit because they have legalized prostitution and gambling, which is
which pays for everything. Yeah.
Fucking everything. So yeah.
Well, they said that's what it was going to do in California when we legalized weed, but still 95% of all weed grown in California is illegal. So that hasn't paid off yet. And it's only caused people to think that they can just grow as much weed as they want and it not be illegal where it still is. So
we did a funny thing in California with weed, which is a totally different topic. And I would like to get into it as its own topic because I actually wanted to open up a weed business and my wife told me no. So I did a lot of research. I did a lot of research on legalized weed in California before it went legal because I really wanted to open up a business. But there was a problem with how we did it. But that's a different podcast. And the reason I'm not going on is because you said you had a hard cutoff.
I do. I have a hard cutoff. I have a hard cutoff in 15 minutes. But I wanted to come back to the prices being different in Texas with medical care. So
correct.
I wanted to ask you this. So from that perspective, cost of living is going to vary from area to area. In your perfect world of a perfect Medicare system or Medicare for all, some people live off of the federal minimum wage and some people live off of their state minimum wage, which is, it's a whole other argument for a whole other day with minimum wage. But within that, the income, if you're telling me that I'm going to pay an extra $100 a month per person, so $500 a month for my family of 5, just for the baseline insurance that is just the absolute bare minimum.
Well, now, to be fair, we're talking about minimum, but I would say it would be the same type of, it would not change if you already have Medicaid or Medicare, which isn't the bare minimum. It covers more than because, okay, before we get into this, there is a minimal essential coverage that all health insurances must cover, right?
Right.
That's a fact because of Obamacare, right? Obamacare, one of the things it said was you can't have pre-existing conditions be a factor, and there is a minimal essential coverage that all insurance companies must meet. Medicare and Medicaid are above and beyond that already. So the verbiage of it's going to be the bare minimum isn't true because we already have a bare minimum. We've established it. It's called minimal essential coverage, and Medicaid and Medicare already surpass that. So you're going to be getting adequate care. You just don't want to go through that system, which is a totally viable option, and it's your option not to do it as well.
Okay, fair enough. I'm trying to figure out the associated costs of this system on the individual end user of said system. How much do you feel is a fair percentage of your income to pay for that system? Do you like, because again, when looking at a lot of the other systems, when you look at other socialized medicine countries like Canada or others in Europe, their tax rates as an individual, typically income tax rates, are significantly higher than here in the US to pay for those socialized systems. Now, as a country, I think we've ultimately accepted that there will be certain things that we need to socialize to function as a society. And then there's a cost associated with everything that you socialize, right? So what is an acceptable percentage of someone's income that we say, hey, you're a person, you're going to get medical care. That is what percentage of that person's income? Is it a 10% of your income?
Don't increase
Is
it.
it 5%? Is it 30%?
Our income tax for California is based off of how much you make, right? Because we did it in the first podcast. If I remember correctly, it was roughly
20%.
20%. Okay.
We'll just say 20%.
Okay. And the reason why is because I'm going back to the best ranked healthcare systems, right? And Norway was number 1.
Okay.
And their income tax rate is 22%.
Norway's income tax.
Income tax rate for Norway is 22%. I'm looking at it right now. Skateten.no, foreign tax returns on average is 22%. That's lower than a lot of people pay here, but it's also more than some people pay here because we have a tiered tax rate, right? I would argue that 22% is not that bad. Now, if you compare that to another country, I think was second was Sweden. Sweden ranges from 29 to 35. Now, that might seem like a lot, but remember, top earners, if you're making over 500 grand, you're already at 39% here. So you're above that. And if you're between 100 grand and 499,000, you're at 37%, which is still also above Sweden. So
I'm reading a little bit about Norway's medical care system. Right. They spend an average of $6,100 per person. And they pay out of pocket $210 is the cap for how much they pay out of pocket. After that $210, obviously outside of their individual taxes on that spending, after that 210 out of pocket costs, everything else is free for the year. That's the way their system is set up.
I would be great with that.
However,
even if it's per person.
However, people can completely opt out of the public system and choose private insurance instead. And they'll typically get, that's hilarious. It costs $56 a month. And 91% of the time, people that have that insurance, the cost is 100% covered by their jobs. It's at $56 a month. That's hilarious to me, that it can be that cheap.
Right,
which
exactly,
makes
shit, that's awesome.
Yeah, if it was that cheap, then I would argue yes. I'm still interested to see that their household tax rate, and I'd have to ask a lot of questions about that. I will have to do some more reading. I think if that, yeah, no, we're not on time for that. I think that's an interesting way to do it. And I don't have an answer for you. I don't have an answer for you on saying I disagree with that, or that's wrong, or that is a dumb idea. I do think that what we have here in the U.S. Has its benefits. Like as going back to, having, I would still argue some of the best, if not the best doctors in the world. But I would also agree with you in that this is not the best healthcare system in the world by a long shot. And that there are large areas that we could improve on. But the correct answer to that, again, I don't know. I don't know what the right solution is for that. I do get very nervous when you tell me $100 a month per person out of pocket for the baseline system, on top of tax percentage increases to cover that. We're talking, if we're talking someone who lives off of the federal, we'll say the federal minimum wage, just for them, that's like 10% of their income, on top of an increased tax rate, to cover their medical insurance. That's a lot of money.
Is it $750 or $725 for the
I calculated $750,
which is
$1,200 a month if you work 40-hour work week.
Right. No, it's $15,600 a year, which means you can opt out of paying all taxes and still owe nothing at the end of the year because you're under the amount of what you'd have to pay. So you would see all of your money because I opt out. There's an option in your check when you work, when they take taxes out.
Not again.
And pay nothing in taxes.
Correct. You pay nothing taxes. You still pay Social Security,
Mhm.
and then you still have to pay for your medical. Right. If you have private medical insurance, and I would argue that you should still pay for medical, whatever you set up. Are you saying that under this system that because it gets taken out like a tax, you would not pay for it if you don't owe any taxes?
That is an option, yeah. If it's taken out like taxes, then yeah.
I don't know about that, bud. And that's where I say I think there needs to be a cost to it, but what is that cost, right? What is that number cost? And it's what we're trying to do here, what we're talking about is putting a value on a human life, right? And that is a very difficult conversation to have, and to say your health is worth $200 a month. Is it worth $100 a month? Is it worth $50 a month? Is it worth $30 trillion? Is it worth $50 trillion? Like, if I tell you, hey, if we spend an extra $4,000 a year per person in the US, like our life expectancy, everybody will live 5 years longer. Like, is that worth it? Some people would say yes, and some people would say no, because they're like, I don't have $4,000 to spend.
It's usually gonna be the rich people saying, I don't want to pay that extra $4,000, because for the poor people won't have to pay for it anyway, because they don't have any money to pay for it.
Well, right. They're gonna be like, I
And
can't
so
afford $4,000 right
the people
now.
that are gonna be paying for it are gonna be the people that are wealthy, and they don't like paying for anything. And that's typically where it comes from. The other thing,
That's how they got wealthy in the first place.
Exactly. The other thing you could do is divert that tax to business taxes, right? I mean, right now, a lot of corporates pay zero in taxes. Make them start paying that, and that would go towards that to fund it. I was going to actually bring something up, and I totally got sidetracked. It's horrible.
Well, let's not go off on a tangent again here.
Okay,
We
we do need to shut this down.
Yeah,
it was actually related to what you're talking about, but I totally forgot what it was, so never mind.
That's okay. I do think that I think we completely agree that there should be some sort of a baseline minimum system there. How we pay for it, how we go about that, I don't necessarily think we agree on. I do think it's going to be far more expensive than the initial arguments state, and that's my concern. Is what my biggest concern in whatever we do is that if we create a system that is significantly underfunded, we promise the world, and then it's significantly underfunded, and we end up with the DMV version of healthcare, and a perfect example. And I say the DMV all the time, but realistically, anybody who's ever been to the VA knows how garbage it is, knows how hard it is to get the healthcare that you actually need, and that is the government DMV medical system, the VA, and it's a hot pile of garbage. And if we end up with that for the entire population here in the US, we're going to be hurting. And I think that's what people are genuinely scared of.
I don't blame them, because I agree VA is fucking trash. And you also notice I never brought up the VA. Even when I talked in the cost, right? I completely left that out of the cost as well, right? Because the VA is hot garbage. The VA is running off of a DOS system built in the 1970s. They have not updated since, right? I use Medicare as an example because Medicare is fairly decent, but in all honesty, the health insurance that's government funded that I would like to see everyone have access to is the same one the senators get. If it's good enough for the senators and they're government employees, they're public employees, we should be getting that health insurance as well.
Are we allowed to give ourselves 20% raises too?
We should be.
That'd be nice. All right, let's go ahead and cut it off there before we shoot over Zach's time.
I know I like that though. I like that. Honestly, I legitimately like if the government employees are able to get it, why can't everybody else, right? If you can't create a system that if you don't like it and you aren't willing to use it, why is everybody else required to use it, right? And that is again, that comes back to my concerns. Rules for thee, but not for me. Let's talk about Newsom.
I will bring up what I was going to bring. I remember what I was going to talk about. I'll bring it up in the Discord, since I know you got to go in 3 minutes. But I do also want to end up by saying that I agree. I'm happy we met on a baseline, because I think it's fundamental when we're having these discussions. If we can at least agree on the core issue, we can agree to disagree on how it's implemented. But if we at least have a baseline to meet on, I think it shows where we come together at.
And I think that's one of the main things that we have, is most of us all agree on the same core things that we want, but we can never agree on how to implement them.
Well, that's the nuance of this, and there are definitely conversations that we have where we don't agree on the baseline, and that's a whole other kind of debate.
Guns, for example.
Guns is a fantastic example, which we will get to eventually. We're gonna have some fun with that one. But then there are other conversations like this where we're fundamentally in agreement that the system currently is broken and it needs to be fixed. And we have a baseline of like, yeah, I think that's a good idea if we did something in this general category. But then the implementation of that, it can take wildly different directions and wildly different turns. And I definitely enjoyed today's conversation. So,
All right,
Me too. Excellent.
let's go ahead and close it out. For
Thank you, guys.
viewers
Appreciate
that
it.
we will eventually have, how do they reach you, Zach? What's your Twitter, anything like that? You got any of those?
they reached me here by coming and watching our live stream.
Awesome. Sounds good. What about you, Neil? You got anything outside of this Twitch?
The Hefeoso YouTube channel where this is going to be posted. And
Yep.
they
And
can
I will have
reach
that
me
linked on
comments.
our Twitch channel as well.
Awesome. And I'll respond to all the comments in there as well.
So, and I do have Twitter. I don't use it very often.
You
But
got
it's
one of them
under
new tweeters.
Cryogenic Marine, just like everything I use. And then of course the Twitch channel here.
Nice.
Thanks for coming, guys. And we're gonna close it out here. You guys have a good
How's it
night.
going?
Peace.